This is my favorite photo that I've ever taken. This is me, and let me just say that I'm not an artist when it comes to photography. I mean, sure, I do photography. I've done photography for most of my life. I've taken classes in it, and I've even worked professionally, but as a point of identity, I'm not the meticulous artist, the visionary, or the stalwart grandmaster. I'm just a guy who was lucky enough to have a nice camera for much of my life. And in a way, I think that's what I'd rather be. That's what makes photography so great, that it's just so accessible. Anyone can do it if they just have a camera, and nowadays everyone has a camera. I love baseball, but to play it you need a ball, a bat, a glove, a field, and several other people. For photography, it's just you, the camera, and the world around you. Sometimes you'll be capturing a spectacular moment, sometimes you'll be searching for the delicate and unique, sometimes you'll find a way to make the most mundane thing enthralling. Photography is brilliant, but I don't know if I ever had the right eye for photography. You know, that which looks for those geometric patterns and classical compositions, symmetry, the rule of thirds, domes, spirals, leading lines. I'd like to think that I understood those compositions, but I was never thinking about them when I was actually out there taking pictures. What I was thinking was more along the lines of, I really like looking up at the trees, or I really like when the clouds are dynamic on windy days. And I don't mind a little bit of sun flare, that's fine. Look at this photo. My teachers would have hated this. The subject is unclear, it's not symmetrical, the leading lines are all over the place, and the trees make it feel too claustrophobic. And I hear that, but I really enjoy this photo. Where am I? Is that smoke? No, that's a tree. I feel boxed in. I like how this photo takes me back to that uncertainty I felt out there in the middle of nowhere when I took it. I mean, what even is that structure? It's not a cabin, it's not an overhang, it's just a bizarre man-made roof in the middle of the mountains. I mean, that wouldn't be the first time that my taste didn't line up with others. While I was in college, I worked freelance for some local bands, and the pictures that they liked enough to buy off of me were all those that clearly showed their faces and the parties, and something that would be good for social media. But these were my favorites. The smoky dark, the passion in the music, the bizarre tricks of the low light. That's what I like the most. Maybe the reason this photo is my favorite is that I finally did employ some of those techniques that I learned in those classes. I mean, the symmetry is pretty good, and the sweeping stars make a nice canopy, but really, the technique that I was emphasizing the most here was bulb photography. Back in the day when cameras were far more primitive, we didn't have a button that we could press to open and close the shutter. Instead, we had a little bulb that had air in it. When you squeezed the bulb, the air was forced into the camera and it pushed the shutter open, and when we let go of the bulb, the air would rush out and the shutter would close. So you see, the shutter would stay open for as long as you were squeezing the rubber bulb. And then when you let go, it would finally close, but it could be a minute or 2 minutes later, it didn't matter. Nowadays, our shutter speeds are all calculated by the computer, and we can put them in before we even press the button to take the shot. But if you switch your camera to manual, and you start making that shutter speed slower and slower and slower, eventually you'll stop seeing things like 1 second, 2 seconds, 5 seconds, 10 seconds, and you'll see something that just says bulb, and that's the final setting. And at that point, you're welcome to keep the shutter open for as long as you're willing to hold the button down. And if you have a remote trigger with a lock on it, then you could just open the shutter and walk away from the camera. And it would be open for hours even. This is the night of my 21st birthday. I was out on the coast with some friends who were celebrating someone else's birthday at the time. We left the camp at about 2 a.m. and wandered out onto the rocky coast. Eventually winding our way down the cliffs, we found ourselves at a rocky field of tidal crags. These sharp rocks were mostly submerged during high tide and now during low tide. as the moon was setting away from us. They were above water. My two friends were willing to brave this field of slippery, mossy death traps to get up to this big boulder that was way out there. Me, holding a bunch of expensive camera equipment, decided not to do it. Instead, I set up my tripod, fixed my camera to it, hoping the horizon was straight. It wasn't. I was in practically total darkness, and I started taking some bold photography. And while I was sitting there for 15-30 minutes watching the moon set, a family of skunks just sort of came out of the bushes next to me and walked down in front of the tripod, not in the range of the lens, but just, down in front of the tripod, going on their merry way. 2 big ones and about 4 little babies. They didn't spray me, and it's not because they didn't see me. They kind of just, walked by, looked at me, gave me a tip of the cap, so to speak, and carried on with their night. It was kind of incredible. And so was the shot that I got, even though the horizon was off. I got a second shot as well, this time of my friends' flashlights as they descended the boulder. Bull photography is really fascinating for me. It's a bit like time-lapse in a way, because you see, when you're taking a picture, you're capturing a single small moment. And when you're taking a movie, you're capturing thousands of tiny moments. When you slow it down and take slow-motion photography, you're expanding each of those moments. But when you do time-lapse, you're kind of compressing them. And the ultimate time-lapse is bulb, taking thousands of moments and compressing it into one image. You can make yourself look like some kind of ghost, or like there are 2 of you. You can do cheesy special effects, create a weird ghostly forest, or just reenact Doctor Who. One of my favorite things to do with bulb photography is to watch the stars trace across the sky. But still, that's not why this is my favorite picture. Maybe you see that light near my head. That's me, by the way, if I hadn't said that already. And the light near my pocket. I was on the phone when I took that picture. And the conversation that I was having, well, like many people, I entered my first relationship when I was in high school. And I was very naive to how these things were supposed to work. And it was fun, it was surprising. I didn't expect anyone to actually like me in that way. And it was ultimately rather abusive. But I was young, and I didn't understand what a relationship was supposed to be like. I didn't understand that I was being abused. Emotionally, physically, psychologically. The world had not presented me with any evidence to that point that anyone else could or would like me in that way. And so I stayed. No matter how bad it got, I stayed. For 5 years. 6 if you count all the time that we spent in sort of a on-again, off-again frenemies situation. But college had finally put some distance between us, and we figured we could overcome it, because at the time that was the goal. But thankfully, we couldn't. Things got worse and worse and worse. She got worse and worse and worse, and I think I did too. There are dark moments in this story that I do not feel comfortable sharing right now. But this picture is of the phone call that ended it all. This was when it all stopped. I mean, sure, the simple way to say it would be that this is a photo of a breakup. But I think of it as a photo of birth. Because I felt then as if the world had opened up to me in all of its terror and uncertainty and beauty. Because I was so scared that the light had gone out. But then I looked at the photo and I realized that the light was there, shining bright as ever. There was still more to see. There was still more to do. All the amazing things about the world. Strength in the delicate, the frailty in the rugged, the subtlety in the grand, and the comedy in the common. I had loved ones to spend time with, old, new, and yet to be met. I know that many people will just say that I was a fool for staying in that relationship for that long, but I just prefer to be thankful that I got out. So for all of you out there, I guarantee you that the world still has more to show you. And if you can hear me, then the light that exists in you has not gone out yet. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching.